Well, welcome to a brand new study. And this study is called Making Sense of Your World, a Biblical Worldview. And just to give you an idea, this is part of a program that I'm going through called the Colson Fellows Program, which we'll talk more about that as we go through. But we definitely want you guys to look into that because that's something that if you get a chance, you definitely want to do. So we're going to have fun. This is a multi-series class that'll take about, I think it's 11 lessons. And we're just going to have a good old time looking at the world that we live in. So this study is based off of this book. You can get the book if you want. You don't have to because I'm going to really give you the flavor of the book. But if you want to, it's available on Amazon, and just get it if you want it. If you don't want it, don't worry about it. But what we're really doing is looking at a Christian worldview. And this is a great quote. There is no longer a Christian mind. Now, do you believe that? Do you believe that we're living in a culture that doesn't have a Christian mind anymore? And let me tell you something. The world is crazy right now. You know it. If you look at the news every day, we've got people, we've got the abortion issue. We've got Black Lives Matter. We've got basically this idea of homosexuality, transgender. We've got violence in the streets and school shootings and all that stuff. Our world looks like it is completely out of control. And as Christians, we sometimes don't know how to deal with it because we don't want to offend anybody, which is the total wrong approach. But then we don't know how to biblically answer those questions. And sometimes we don't even know if we have that foundation of what's biblical and what's not. So let's take a look at some stats to start out with, because we're going to try to figure this out together from the standpoint of how do we make sense of this world? It's the title of the course, so I think we might as well say that over and over again. How do we make sense of this world? So this information I'm going to give you just to set up why we're why we're doing this study, why it's important, is from the American Worldview Inventory by George Barna and the Arizona State Christian University, Arizona Christian University. Let me get that right. So in this year's study, the 21-22 study that just came out, it says that 69% of Americans self-identify as Christians. Okay, seems like that might feel a little low, but that's still pretty good. But you dig deeper. So 69% believe or self-identify as Christians, but only 6% have a biblical worldview. So think about that. Less than 10% of the people that say they are Christians actually live out what the Bible tells them. Oh, no wonder we're having all these problems in the world. If the Christians don't even know what it means to be Christian, we got a problem. Now you dig a little bit deeper into the data, and what you find out is 88% of Americans have a syncretism, thank you, view, our worldview. Now, what does that mean? The word syncretism is the fusion of different systems of belief, as in philosophy or religion, especially when success is partially or the results of heterogeneous. And again, you know how I pronounce things horribly, but you've got this idea that basically right now, 88% of Americans don't have a consistent worldview. They pick and choose what they believe. And sometimes when they pick or choose what they believe or what we believe, that they're not consistent. They're not coherent. There's actually a cognitive disconnect in our own belief systems. And what that means is, I'll give you an example. During COVID, the people were sitting there going, we have to mask up kids in schools to keep them safe. These are the exact same people that said we have to have pro-choice, we have to have abortion. Wait a second. How in the world can you value life on one hand and kill life, and that's a Christian worldview, a biblical worldview, on the other hand? That's what I mean by cognitive disconnect. It doesn't make any sense. When in one hand you value life, in another hand you don't, what the heck's going on? So that's really what we're going to dig into. That's how we're going to dig into this. And this book and this course, because we're going to follow the book as part of the course, is broken up into 3 parts. We're going to spend the first part talking about what's the difference, what is the difference in worldviews make. So why do we care? And then we'll talk about, in the second part, what is a biblical worldview. And then the third part is really the so what part, and it's the view of, meaning a worldview of, and a worldview for. That may not make sense right now, but stay along with me and hopefully it will. So, the difference a worldview makes. Let's talk. So we're going to talk 3 parts of this particular section. The first one is today. Today is setting nothing more than the groundwork of when worldviews collide. What is a worldview? And when we get into next week, we'll dig deeper into all the different worldviews. And then finally, in this section, how do you test a worldview? How do you test it? So today, we're looking at really when worldviews collide. It's what you see in the news every day. And we're going to take 3 people and their statements about things and sort of see where they're all different and where their worldviews are different and why that makes a difference. So first, this guy. You've heard of this guy. It's Richard Dawkins. He is a devout atheist. That is his religion, atheism. You could call him a naturalist, a humanist, however you want to say it. He does not believe in God. And this is his statement. And it's amazing, okay, because this statement is prevalent in today's culture. And this is what he says. In a universe of blind physical force and genetic replication, some people are going to get hurt and other people's are going to get lucky. You won't find any rhyme or reason in it or any justice. The universe we observe has precisely the properties we would expect if there is, at the bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, and no good. Nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. Or things just happen. That's the naturalistic view. That's the atheist's view. Things just happen, no big deal. Just go on. Live, be merry. You're going to die in your worm food. Whew, that's a bad way to live, but we go on. Then you get another viewpoint, and this lady that I have up here, her name is Helen Jones Hayes, and she is a security analyst in Denver, and she was a survivor of the 1989 crash of United Flight 232. And during that crash, 111 people died, but she survived. And this was her comment. She believed God took her through the crash for her own personal benefit. She claims, I think I went through this for a purpose, to show that God can still be seen and felt and glorified in the face of this tragedy. That's getting real close to a biblical worldview. All glory goes to God. There's a purpose for things. Now, we like that view. We'll talk more about that view. But let's talk about another worldview. Okay, this would be considered more of along the lines of pantheism. And this is a feng shui consultant. Her name's Maria Diamond. And she's talking about The Secret, if you've ever read that book. The Secret means we are creators of our own universe, and that every wish that we want to create will manifest in our lives. Do we really believe that that's biblical? Do we really believe that that is the gospel message? Absolutely not. But people do believe that. So you look at these three things. These are all worldviews. Okay? Our worldview is the way we make sense of our world and our lives. And everyone has a worldview. You may not know it, but you have a worldview, or a worldview has you. So everyone has a worldview, whether they know it or not. So let's talk here and give this definition of what a worldview is. A worldview is the framework of our most basic beliefs that shapes our view of and for the world. Remember that back there? That was the of and for. Of and for the world, and is the basis of our decisions and actions. Wow. That's pretty heavy. So this triangle that I'm about to show you here is really the key to get into your head of why a worldview matters. So a worldview, your basic fundamental beliefs, will lead to your values. And your values will lead to your behavior. Now, what's wrong with the world today, and what's wrong with our politicians or these social activists, is they focus in on the top of the triangle. They focus in on behaviors. Black lives matter. Now, we'll say all lives matter. Black lives certainly matter, but all lives matter. And the Black Lives Movement, guess what? That's a Marxist movement that wants to destroy everything. But the problem isn't the behavior. The problem is the worldview. So the conversation doesn't start with, well, wait a second, all lives matter. The conversation starts with the worldview, because the behavior is at the top of the triangle. The behavior demonstrates the values, but the values come from the worldview. So all of our conversations around social injustice, social justice, all of that kind of things needs to be down at the bottom, down at what the worldview is, the lens that we look through the world of how we look and how we deal and live in this world, how we make sense of this world. Now, a philosopher, and you may know him, Tolstoy, he basically, before he converted to Christianity, he asked these 6 questions. And these 6 questions really are the formation of what your worldview is. You have to answer these questions in order to understand your worldview. The first question is, why am I living? Okay. The second question he asked is, what is the cause of my existence and that of everyone else? Pretty good questions. These are deep questions. These are not the questions that we sometimes ask today, but we should. Why do I exist? Why is there a division of good and evil within me? Meaning, and if you were, when we went through the class with Mere Christianity, and we talked about, the natural law and this idea that there's good and evil in the world, and we know it, but we don't really understand where it came from. This is what he was asking. 5th question, how must I live? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to live in this world? Every worldview answers these questions in some way. And then lastly, what is death? How can I save myself? Is this all there is? These are the things that he asked. And this is what develops a worldview. Answering these types of questions, and we're going to show you a chart here in a little bit, is where a worldview comes from. Now, what's the purpose of this study? What am I trying to do with this? All right. And it really comes down to what they said the purpose of the book is. We want to offer an honest explanation or explore an analysis of the world of worldviews. There are lots of worldviews out there. And as a Christian, how are we supposed to deal with those? So first of all, we want to look at what all these different worldviews are. Now, mind you, disclaimer, we're going to look at these worldviews from a Christian perspective. Okay, so you're going to get a Christian bias on all of this, and that's okay. We all have biases. Ours is going to be a Christian one. The second purpose of this study is to describe and defend a distinctly biblical worldview. Listen, we believe that the biblical worldview is the reality that we live in, meaning God creates reality. God creates truth. The creator of this universe is who ultimately decides what the purpose of this universe is, and that is our worldview. And we got to make sure that our worldview lines up with what God's reality and truth is. And third is to take the biblical worldview and apply it to our lives. How do we live today in this world of craziness, this world of just pure and total chaos when it comes to thinking? So I'm going to put a fourth one in that is not in this. I want to get you guys psyched up to take and look into the Colson Fellows program. It is not easy. It is offered in Austin. It is offered across the country, so it depends on where you're looking at. This Bible study is taking place in mostly from a Lago Vista standpoint in Texas, in the Austin area. There are a few what they call cohorts in the Austin area. Hill Country Bible is one of them, but there are others. But I want you to walk away from this really introduction into biblical worldview to want to learn more because it is so well worth it. It's hard. The Colson Fellows program is hard. You will have to do what I'm doing right now, which is called a teaching practorium, but it is so worth it in understanding how we can put a biblical worldview into play today in our lives. So with that, let's look at this big, nasty chart. Here are the questions that reveal your worldview. The first is origin. What is the nature of ultimate reality? Where did we come from? Is there a God? Everything starts there. The more and more I look at this, the more and more I realize that the first 11 chapters of Genesis are key to understanding what we are and what our worldview is. Meaning, second, why is there something rather than nothing? What's the meaning of life? What's our purpose? All right? Those are questions. That's meaning. These are worldview questions. These are big questions, not small questions. Morality. Why does it seem that the world is not as it should be? All right? Why is it like this? Why do we think that it shouldn't be this way? What is right and wrong? Where does right and wrong come from? I mean, our culture today, morality is what you make of it. Next one, identity. Oh, Lord. What does it mean to be a human being? Who am I? Why am I here? How do I fit in? I mean, these are all questions that are tearing our culture apart. You think of the transgender movement right now, and basically they don't know who they are. And they think that they can make their own reality when it comes to gender? Seriously? That takes Genesis 3, when God said, I made you go out and be fruitful and multiply. A man and a woman marry. We're messed up. Our kids are messed up. right now because they don't know who they are. They don't know who they are in God, who God meant them to be. And then lastly, you have destiny. Look, what happens after I die? Where is history going? Is this all there is? I mean, because listen, if you live a Christian biblical worldview and you know that this reality, this time on earth, is such a small time and that I have eternity with God, you live your life different. All right? If you believe that this is it, I get 60, 70, 80 years and that's it, oh, you're going to live totally different. You're going to live totally different. So this is the big questions that we should be talking about, not the little questions that we sometimes deal with on Facebook and social media, Twitter, where you have 140 characters to tell your philosophy of world life. No, these are the big questions, and we have to start thinking big. We have to start thinking big. So there are four things that we have to confront to come up and answer these questions. Those four things, the answers we embrace to these ultimate questions, whether consciously or subconsciously, because you got to understand, some people don't even think about this stuff, but it comes to them subconsciously and they make a decision about it. These three major concepts, and I'm going to give you a fourth, this is what decides our worldview. This is what makes our worldview. And the three main, and I'm going to give you a fourth one, is how do we think about God? That's where it all starts. How do we think about humanity? And how do we think about nature? I'm going to add one, and this is one that is not in the book, but it comes from what the Colson Fellowship has been dealing, the Colson Center has been dealing with, and that is, how do I think about me? All right. So let's look at these four big categories of questions that we have to look at. And we're going to look at some quotes about these, but we'll talk a little bit as we go. So the first is, how do we confront God? And the view of God is the starting point for every worldview. Every one of the worldviews that we're going to review next week all starts with this question: how do we deal with God? And Adler here that we're going to talk about, he was incredible teacher. He did edited the great books of the Western world. So he, in that series of books, which takes you through all of really Western history from the beginning and gives you things to read from these great philosophers, writers, teachers, thinkers, however you want to think it. He says this: more consequential for thought and actions follow the affirmation or denial of God than from answering any other basic question. It all starts with how you think about God. Is there a God? Is there not a God? Is there a God? What kind of God is he? Is the God of Scripture that has been revealed to us, or is he a God of your mind? Those are things we have to answer. It all starts there. The second thing is, how do we confront humanity? What is a human being? What is human's place in the world? And this quote is wonderful. Man has always been his own most vexing problem. How shall he think of himself? Now, this part sort of breaks into, how do I think of myself and how do I think of others? So this is where we break it into two, of how do I think of humanity, others, and how do I think of myself? And think about it. Jesus was asked, what are the greatest laws? And he said, love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and spirit. Love your neighbors as yourself. Well, I first have to love God before I know how to love myself and know who I am within God. Then I can love my neighbors. So we have to deal with all those three things. Now, the third major category that's in the book is how do we relate to the physical universe? Now, I say physical there, but it's more than just the physical universe. Man confronting non-man. How do we deal with nature, but how do we deal with the supernatural? Okay, there is a supernatural out there. But in today's more enlightened world, we don't want to think about the supernatural because we can't scientifically prove it. So how do we confront that? That's part of how we develop our worldview. Is it a biblical worldview? Now, we ought to be intentional about our worldview. And trust me, if you go out today and you say to somebody, what's your worldview? They're going to stare at you with a blank stare and say, I don't know. But we as Christians have to know. Because how do you make sense of it? People have not thought through what they believe. And that lies the problem that we have today, why everything is so messed up. So the question is not, do I have a worldview? We all do. You have one whether you know it or not. But which worldview do I have? And is it the one I ought to have? And I'll add another point here. Is it fully biblical and not picking at the a la carte menu of worldviews to pick a little bit here, pick a little bit here, and sit there and say, this is now my truth, this is now my reality, this is now my worldview. Because guess what? If it is your worldview and not God's worldview, it ain't the one that you're supposed to have. So we're going to talk through all that in this series. So I left this one out. We talked a little bit about this, but there is a problem today, and it hasn't just been today. It started hundreds of years ago, but it's really blossomed really in the last few years, and it's something called expressive individualism. And what that means is, right now, from a human existence, how do I think about me? It's this problem that we have where people are finding their reality and their truth from within. That is not going to work. You cannot make your own reality, nor do you want to. We as Christians find truth and reality in God through his revealed scripture. We do not find truth and reality from within. But the secular world, with all of its different worldviews, naturalistic worldview, the postmodern worldview, all these things which that may not make sense to you, those terms, they will as we go through. They look at truth from the inside out instead of the outside in. We know that we are sinners. We know that we have a God that created us, and that in order to have a relationship with him, we have to believe in his son Jesus Christ, who came to redeem us. Those are the realities of who we are as humans. But if we think that we can change our gender, if we think we can make our own rules in reality, yeah, we have free will, but free will has consequences. Ideas have consequences, and we'll talk more about that. So this is a new one, and it's very prevalent today, and it's a hard one to deal with, because we've been dealing with these kind of questions in culture the last few years, looking at behavior, not looking at worldview, if you remember that triangle at the beginning. So, worldview and culture. What is culture? Okay, so John Kraft, who is a biblical philosopher, however you want to put that, theologian, defines worldview in a corporate sense. Okay, worldview is personal, but in a corporate sense, as the central systemization of concepts of reality to which the members of a culture ascend, largely unconsciously, and from which stems their value system. So let's talk about this. We live in an American culture. Well, I'll even get farther than that. We live in a Texan culture, okay, that is part of America, which is part of the West, okay? Those cultures not only define our worldview, but become the norms of our worldview, okay? So a worldview is personal, yet it is influenced and influences culture. So one's culture then is the integrated system of learned behaviors and patterns which are characteristic of the members of a society and which are not the results of biological inheritance. What that means is you live in Texas. All right, we still raise our kids to say yes ma'am, yes sir. All right? That's a cultural norm. All right. But here's the thing. You could come from a different culture, a genetic, biological culture, if you want to call it that. Meaning you're an Asian American who grows up and lives in Texas. Guess what? Because of the members of those societies that have characteristics like saying, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, that becomes then ingrained into your system and your behavior. So you see how things like that start to make sense. Um, it, uh, I think it was Ravi Zacharias said that some cultures love their neighbors and some cultures eat their neighbors. Sort of get the point. You know what I'm saying? So we have to look at that also. You want to complain about culture. You're part of the culture. Your worldview not only influences the culture, but it influences then the behavior and pattern of the culture. So it's a very interesting little dynamic. So that was a lot to take in. I'm trying to keep these lessons short. Here's the thing I want you to do is, as you're listening to these things, as you have questions, pop those babies in the comment section wherever you're watching this. If you're watching it on the Shoe Leather Gospel app, or if you're watching it on Facebook or YouTube, put the questions in there, and that'll be fun to answer. Have a dialogue about this. Don't let this just stop as information coming in. It's information coming in that should wrap around in your mind, and then we discuss it. All right, so let's have a discussion. I know this is online, but we can still have a discussion. So the last thing for tonight is this. This is a biblical perspective that helps to shape your worldview. Now, the worldview is going to answer those questions that we showed previously, but this is the pathway of biblical revelation that gives us the perspective, and that is this: God is the creator. This creation isn't the way it's supposed to be because God gave us free will. And guess what? With free will came disobedience and the fall. But that fall was not just left there by God. He provided a redeemer. So we have redemption in Jesus Christ. But it doesn't stop there. We know that he's coming again, and we're ultimately going to have a restoration of what the creation was supposed to be. So wrap your arms and your mind around that biblical perspective, because that, as we go through this next few weeks, will help you to make sure that your worldview is a biblical worldview. Hope you like this lesson today. This is really just an introduction. We're just sticking our toes in the water and trying to get a lay of the land of worldviews. So next week, we're going to look deeply at worldviews, at the different worldviews that are out there, and how those stack up, how those compare to what we believe the worldview, the reality, the truth, which is the biblical worldview as God has revealed to us in His Scripture. So for next week, we'll think through all of that and we'll start digging a lot deeper. You'll have questions. Put them in the comment bars, email me, text me, do whatever you need to do. You can watch these videos not only on Facebook, but on YouTube and also the Shoe Leather Gospel app, which is free. Please get that. That would be good. Lastly, as we go through these lessons, understand that it is not just knowledge that we want to gain. It's wisdom that we want to use and help our lives as we go through that. So there you go. Love y'all guys. And I say greetings from the beach down here in Port Aransas. And we'll be back up in Austin every once in a while. So I hope to see you. Drop me a note in the comment section to say that you've watched this, that you've enjoyed it, or that you've hated it. If you've hated it, maybe keep that to yourself, but that's a whole other thing. But I look forward to digging deeper with you. Also, last recommendation, look at the Colson Center website. And also, if you're a podcast listener, you might want to look at the Breakpoint podcast. It's like a minute or two every day, and it's really well done. Until next time, we will see you. Take care.